Hello, I'm Jace Tanner, reporting from Vancouver's Downtown Eastside for rabble.ca. Earlier this week, I met with Jay Hamburger, the artistic director of Theatre in the Raw. Working out of the Carnegie Community Centre, Jay has produced numerous plays in the Downtown Eastside. He also has a show on Coop Radio. Our conversation centered primarily on Bruce, the musical, about Bruce Eriksen, the activist who started the Downtown Eastside Residents Association and later went on to become a city councillor. He was partners with Libby Davies, who has been on previous episodes of this series. Bruce Eriksen died in 1997. The play was produced to honor him and his commitment to the people of his neighbourhood. We also discussed some of the other plays that Jay has put on the stage, as well as the people involved in creating them.
Bruce was a born organizer.
Bruce really had a vision. He had a vision for this neighborhood.
He had a great sense of what people needed, how to communicate with people, how to get people kind of galvanized around an issue.
The tipping point can be the start. It puts the horse before the cart, but you're the one who has to drive. You've got to change and really try.
Hi, Jay Hamburger, living in the east side of Vancouver for, I guess, over 30 years. And I've worked at Carnegie for 6.5, teaching and holding a theater workshop, as well as I'm artistic director of Theatre in the Raw, which is right now, February, entering its 27th year of existence as a small grassroots theater. So there's been a lot of work we've done in social areas. Bruce the Musical, well, first of all, my deepest respects to the First Nations people in and around Carnegie and the land here, as well as to Bob Sardi, Libby Davies, and Jean Swanson, who are featured. Well, Bob wrote the play. He wrote the musical, and it features Jean Swanson in it, as well as Libby Davies, as well as the heroic Bruce Eriksen, who was Libby Davies' partner for quite a while until he passed away. But I've always been interested in grassroots theater and in social issues. I have a history of getting arrested, mostly in the States. As well, we were arrested in Canada for Clackwood, my partner and I. And it's just something that gnaws inside of me when an issue comes up, and whether or not to be silent or get involved. And so with the Downtown Eastside and Carnegie, I had heard a lot about Carnegie. I had a lot of friends who were in and out of there, both for reasons of poverty and homelessness, as well as those who were interested in helping out and assisting those who are struggling. And I don't know who sent me down there, but I went in, and I guess I just took a chance and said, do you need somebody who can do theater? I have a degree in it from Carnegie Mellon University. Bob came and saw some of our shows. He saw some of our early plays. We did a piece about somebody who was objecting to the war in Vietnam, a Vietnam veteran who was going out of his mind with memories of Vietnam. We did a play about that by Ernest Heikkinen at Havana. Our first play was Uncle Vanya, I don't know which play Bob had come, but when he saw me down at Carnegie, he started to drop in on these theater workshops I was holding once a week, where I was paid a really minimal amount. I mean, I was not doing it for money. We won't discuss the hourly wage, but it really was a minimal amount. But that wasn't the point. The point was to get people from the Downtown Eastside, to empower them, and to see whether or not we could get some results out of the various different characters that would come and go once a week. So there was a steady flow of regulars who were simply marvelous. Joan Morelli, you couldn't do better. Dora Sanders, and Bob Sardi kept poking his head in. And I guess Bob got really inspired by what was going on there, and he handed me a play, some scenes, and he said, can you try these? Can you do them? I'll even help out and read. So we did.
Hello folks, and welcome to the Downtown Eastside. It's a great neighborhood, the proverbial million stories. I've reported on a few of them myself. I'll be your narrator this evening as we travel back to when the Downtown Eastside was better known as Skid Road. Now, how I got involved in all this is, one day, my editor called me over and told me to go down to Hastings Street and check out this guy called Bruce Eriksen, who was raising a ruckus in the beer parlors, trying to get them shut down for serving too much booze to the drunks. I thought, whoever it was, he must be a crank or a temperance nut. Why would anybody be wanting to stop the down and outers from drinking? It had to be one of the few pleasures they had left.
We were dealing with Bob, with a writer, a very versed reporter for the Vancouver Sun. And Bob was good. I was looking at, because of this interview about Bruce the musical, I was looking at the play, which was originally called The Tipping Point. And the tipping point was really, what was it in the tipping point? What was the tipping point that got these remarkable people? Libby, Gene Swanson, who's now on council, Bruce Eriksen, including Bob Sardi, Muggs, many people in Carnegie. What was the tipping point that really got them active, that really got the activism going, that helped to get DERA, the Downtown Eastside Residents Association? What was it that got them going? What was it that got them to save Carnegie? Because in the play, Carnegie is vulnerable. They may tear it down. It was a museum, it was a library, then a museum, and it was obsolete for quite a while. Nobody knew what its fate was until some real heroes came along and said, you have to save this building. First of all, it's a great piece of architecture, I think, considering. And second of all, they needed a community center right at Main and Hastings, which is where this remarkable building is, and what goes on inside. But Bob kept getting more and more inspired and seeing that I knew something, and I was still, I'm still running the theater. Things weren't falling apart. It wasn't all helter-skelter. And he was coming to see stuff, and he said, I've got a play, I think. Will you read it? And so, amongst all these other plays that come flying at me, and I liked Bob. He was just, we hit it off. Bob was just wonderful sense of humor, and very inventive, incredibly inventive. I mean, his activism was not a normal activism. I mean, he would get dressed up in costume, and he would get the word out in such a way that it made it interesting. He knew how to catch your attention with his activism. And he was on to all these issues that were coming out of the Downtown East Side. He was onto them as a reporter. So I was really dealing with somebody who knew his oats. He knew his business. And I agreed with just about everything that his activism was about. I mean, I agreed with, the issue of homelessness down there, the issue of alcoholism, of drugs. And he was reporting about this in the Vancouver Sun. And he would do small quips, small stories that really were they were just tiny insights into what was going on in the Downtown Eastside. He first started with the Georgia Strait, where eventually his son worked, Doug, and Bob was right in there with the Georgia Strait. But then he moved on. He was also able to get into the union there, which I think he was a union guy underneath it all. The response to Bob's articles, I think, were good. I mean, when he wanted to run one, he pretty well ran them. And to my knowledge, I don't think he had that much trouble with the Sun. Now,
What year was that, roughly?
Gee, those were the 80s and 90s. He went into retirement, and when he went into retirement, he then got really involved with Carnegie. He didn't serve on the board, or he had Muggs was doing that, his partner, but he was serving meals. He was involved in all kinds of activities there. He actually did a Bob Sardi walk where he would take people from the Downtown East Side and they would go to various different areas in the city that they weren't that familiar with. And he would lead a guide. He would be almost like a guide leading them. Well, it was a rough draft. So my old editorial self kicked in and I said, Bob, this is good. I'm interested. I didn't say right away because you're never sure what you're going to get into. And you can get burnt quite a bit. We won't go into what can happen between a producer, director, and a playwright. It can get finicky. It can get strange. But with Bob was, oh, good, okay. Here's the script. What do you want? And it was like, give me a chance, Bob. Let me read this and let me see. So I read it and I said, well, I think it's got possibilities. It's good. He was talking about issues in it that needed to be addressed. Alcoholism, serving too many drinks after closing hours in bars in the Downtown East Side. I'll have to speak for him in this instant, and I think I'm right with this. Bob wanted to honor certain people that had done remarkable work, that were in some ways unsung heroes. Bruce Eriksen came, was a working class guy, rough around certain edges, and yet a heart of gold to try to correct the crooked street and get it to go in a safe and healthy way. And he would go into the bars and he would challenge these bar owners about serving drinks after closing hour. And these guys falling dead drunk in the streets and nearly dying. So that was an issue in the play that Bob wrote about and showed us Bruce raising hell and getting Gene Swanson involved in the movement. Gene was a server in one of the pubs and hated the work. Or here I am speaking for a lot of these people, but in the play, she doesn't like the work. We'll stay with somewhat of the fiction. She doesn't like the work in the play, and she would like to get the hell out. And the next thing she does, she quits her job, and because of Bruce Eriksen and the activism. And he says, wow, this is somebody I want to have work with me. She goes to work in Dira. And her activism never stops thereafter.
Hi, I'm looking for Roger.
Yeah, that's me. Who are you?
Jean Swanson. I was sent by the union for the afternoon shift.
Okay.
4 p.m. start time.
Yeah, well, you're right on time. Where have you worked?
I worked in Comox on the island and in Nelson. Since I got to Vancouver, I've been working shifts local 40.
You worked the skids before?
Skids.
Yeah, you know, around here, Hastings Street. You know how to handle the situations here? There's a lot of tough characters. You can't let them get away with anything.
I worked the Blackstone, the Metropole.
Okay, that's okay. You better get started. They're getting thirsty. Marty and Danny, these two in the corner.
What can I get for you, gentlemen?
We got Danny now. We're gentlemen, okay. I am Marty. This is Danny. All right, Gene, I'll have a couple.
Same here.
Okay, coming right up. Roger, give me 4.
Okay, take these.
I said 4.
Take 8.
They only asked for 4.
Give them 8. They'll take them.
Okay, you're the boss.
Libby is in the play. There's a bit of a romance, even though he's much older. She's kind of taken in by him. Realizes his foibles, his warts, but his very good side. And eventually she has a child by him, but she's right there with him every inch of the way.
The last time we saw Eriksen, he was a mess. He's got himself all cleaned up now. He's got a job too, working for DIRA, the Downtown Eastside Residents Association. He doesn't just work for it. He started the whole operation. And he's got an assistant now too, Libby Davies. They've got a thing going, but it's not public yet.
Hey, Bruce, come on over here, join the party. Oh, good. Look, there's Marty and Danny. Libby, I want to meet you. I want to introduce you to these guys. They'll let you know what's happening on the streets.
Now remember, sugar, not vinegar.
Greetings and hallucinations, folks. Good to see you. Here, read all about it in the Downtown East newspaper. And while you're at it, nominate your favorite cockroach-infested hotel in the Downtown East Side. It's about time these people got some credit for all the good work they've been doing.
Hey, Bruce, who's your young friend?
Oh, this is Libby Davies. When you fill out those nomination forms, she'll take them.
Hi, fellas. Happy to make your acquaintance.
But Bruce, what are you doing down here? I thought you was undercover.
And they lived in the Downtown East Side. They may have lived on Hastings, but they lived right in there, so that they were feeling the pulse of what was going on at the time. But Jace, it should be, for your audience, it should be known that the play deals with alcoholism and fires. Like there weren't proper fire extinguishers in those SROs, single room occupancy hotels. What's going on here? Aren't these people shouldn't have the protection of a fire extinguisher? Terrible fires where people would die. And really, in the play, Bob tries to show you, do people care? And if they don't care, if they're turning a blind eye, or they're saying, oh, those are just people that are over the hill, there's no point in helping them, how do you get people to care? So the play was a bit of it was an adrenaline. It was a push. It was a jump start to get people to get active.
I got dunked a few times, but I did it for 14 years. Good job, good pay.
But we have a glowing dream of how fair the world will seem when each man can live his life secure and free. When the earth is owned by labor and there's joy and peace for all in the commonwealth of toil that is to be. The Commonwealth of Toil, my favorite song.
Well, this is a very good question. I had to run around to try to find the proper venue, which is, here I had a musical on my hand. It was the first musical I had done in a long, long, long time. It was the biggest musical I had ever taken on. I had to find a venue and thank the stars for the Russian Hall. We got along famously with the people, the board of directors. They were great. And we were packed. We were absolutely packed. And we were packed. We had people like Libby getting up the opening night. And there may have been a councillor or two making speeches from the stage just before the show started. I mean, it was a big deal. And in that sense. And Bob was a terrific promoter. He had all kinds of tricks up his sleeve to get the ball rolling, to get the word out. And he had connections in the city. He had worked for the Georgia Strait. But taking a step back, he handed me a script called The Tipping Point, which needed work. So that was where I had to really sit down with Bob and argue this out. Like, this needs to be honed in. This needs to be cut. We need a song here. It needs to be a little bit longer. He wanted to do a musical. There was no doubt he was going to do a musical. And the first real show we always opened a reading of it at Carnegie. Carnegie was our base. Carnegie was our home. Carnegie was our heart. And for Bob, it was the real deal. Somebody could have come along and said, this place should open in New York. With Bob Sardi, it was Carnegie. Carnegie all the way. And I think we did a reading of it. We had a wonderful cast. We had a little tiny band. We had a piano player, Bill Sample. We had a sax player who lived he must have lived on Union Street or something. We had locals, and we had people from Carnegie helping out, which was marvelous. And it gave it a real sense of community, which Bob in the play really strives for, a sense of community. What words are important to a community, because Bob was a writer. I think he thought it would be catchy, and it would work, and it would be entertaining. And I was probably almost at my wit's end for that kind of thing. It was just, it hit the spot, because we had been doing, Waiting for Godot by Beckett. We had been doing Chekhov's Uncle Vanya, where Vanya wants to shoot himself. We had been doing a piece about a Vietnam vet who wanted to kill himself. So here's Bob coming along, a piece of entertainment. It's got songs, it's music, but it's about serious issues. And you're going, well, wait a minute. How are you going to get people who are down and out to get up and dance, or people who are drinking at bars to get up and dance? And by God, he did it. He found marvelous characters, and he put the real deals in. He put Eriksen in it, and we had the wonderful Steve Maddock, who was an equity union actor. So that was another issue, was raising the money. Just so the audience, your listening audience knows, these ain't cheap deals. So we had to go about raising the dough, and we had to do a lot of grant writing. So I had Carol Weaver, the wonderful Carol Weaver, who was at CCEC, the small credit union, and then came over and worked with us. And I had a number of admin people working there. But we had to do a lot of grant writing, my partner Addie and Bob. And I had to do the final touches on it and mail it in. And we got some grants. We also had to go and ask a couple of higher ups for dough. So we went to Harry Rankin. I saw him in his office on Alexander, which was a great experience. Harry was his usual self. What the hell you want? What do you want to do a musical for? What's this about? He was his gruff old self, but he was great. It was fantastic, and he kind of melted into it.
I think that we need to learn a lesson from Bruce Eriksen, and the lesson we need to learn is that he moved in a class-conscious way. I don't know whether everybody understands what that means, and we all understand it in different ways. Every move he made was in the interest of his fellow men and women.
Well, it was received very well. Opening night was madness. The head of the board of directors was there. She was marvelous. She said, I want my seat up front row. And I said, I don't know if I can give it to you. She said, what do you mean you can't give it to me? I said, well, we're packed. We're to the gills. And she said, forget it. Just let me have my seat. I won't say anything. And the show did very, very well. I mean, we had some remarkable people come and see it. Partly also that Bill, who is quite a composer and a remarkable musician, who knows, a myriad of very well-known musicians in town. He would invite a number of very well-known characters that would come and see it. And that was always marvelous. But, you're dealing with a social issue. And so it's not it's not a Guys and Dolls or the Wizard of Oz or, it touches on subjects that are, there can be these areas that make people feel a little bit uncomfortable. Like, you got to get off your butt and do something if you want change. And a lot of people say, well, okay, fine, but what does that mean? Does it mean I'm going to get arrested? I'm going to lose my job? Does that mean I'm going to have a stigma? And so, you find a lot of people holding back. But Bob was not one to hold back. I mean, he was not one to hold back at all. I mean, he would just get in there like stink. And he knew what he was doing. His activism was it was a kind of a yippie-like activism. It was get attention, cause a little bit of trouble, but you might get the job done. Since then, Vancouver Moving Theatre has really gotten involved. They were always involved in the Downtown Eastside, but they've then gone into a lot of larger play works and brought in music into their work and really brought in indigenous people in all kinds of plays of theirs. I think it highlighted for people, lest we forget, the work that people like Libby and Jean and Sandy Cameron, who was Jean's partner, and the Carnegie newsletter, and Muggs Sigurdsson, and Rika Uta, and Dan Tatro, the marvelous, marvelous work that a guy like Eriksen kind of was the tipping point. He saw problems and he said, something's got to be done. And if you're going to throw me out of a bar because I'm going to, be a rabble rouser, so be it. But maybe that'll bring about change. I mean, we all know about civil disobedience. We all know about, standing on the line and getting arrested. And it can be it could be an exhilarating experience, but it also comes with consequences. And a lot of people, find it irksome. But it can bring about change. I mean, we saw what happened in the U.S. with the voting rights and the black movement in the South, sitting at lunch counters with a person of color of skin isn't allowed, and yet they sit there and they're arrested, and they go through the whole process, and eventually it's a slow movement that gets people to wake up, but it's not over. It's not over. As a matter of fact, we're probably in the middle of it because the environmental movement, things are so desperate on the environmental side that, and also women's rights. You know, the women's movement is getting stronger and stronger, as it should. But the environmental movement needs a lot of help because they're up against the big guns. They're up against money. But it was serious. It was really serious stuff. Because Bob wasn't looking, in my opinion, the reason why we got along and worked so well, I thought, is he wasn't looking for fame. He was looking to get something done, that the play would say something, and the play could motivate people to get off their butts and get active, get out there, and be respectful of certain words that hold meaning in our lives, that we live by these truthful words. I think he'd say, you want to revive it, you want to do it. Let's go. And without his energy, he really pumped a lot of papa at me. And the phone was ringing all the time. You know, and it was like, have you done this? Have you done that? And I was like, Bob, really, I'm trying to raise a kid. My partner and I, we got a small boy who was eventually put in the play. We put him in the play dancing around. He was, Bob was always wanting to bring kids in his productions. And so that really culminated with the Raymer Mothers. The children in the Raymer Mothers, these kids have to cross dangerous tracks without an overpass. There's a railroad there. So, the first thing was we got to have kids in it. And he really was ingenious with it. It was remarkable stuff. And it's because of you I really went back to read the play. And I was reading the play and I realized how good the writing is. The writing holds up. It has texture. It has body. He knew how to edit his own words, so that when we got to the third musical, which was the Raymer Mothers, we were near. Was it maybe in the first? We were damn near into the first rehearsals, or halfway through them, and he had a stroke, and he was really incapacitated. I mean, Doug called me. I had to go to the hospital right away, and there was Doug and some very, very close friends, and it didn't look good. And then he was at the family place down on Argyle. I think it's Argyle or Argyle, and they had operated it on him, and his thing was, you're going to keep going. And I said, yeah. It gives me a sense that it's not flaky. It's a challenge. I never know what's going to happen next. It has its rough sides, which I find fascinating. What really was a great culmination of the work at Carnegie was I got people to write. I got people to write who had not written plays before. I got people on stage who didn't think they could do it, who were pulling knives in the classroom, who were on drugs, who were going off their rockers at times. And yet I was able to get them to take roles in these plays that had been written by locals that kept coming week after week, and I did them as radio plays. And I was very, very fortunate to have the amazing Co-op Radio and a woman named Leela, who at the time was was in charge there. She was kind of the general manager, who let me do what needed to be done, which was produce these radio plays, and then eventually through the Arts Rational program, broadcast them with Jerry Kolomenko. And Jerry, who some people may know out there, has just been a godsend and a lifesaver. It was really his show, but I had been broadcasting with him once a month, and we just opened up once a month a section of that show to do these radio plays that were, about 30, 35, maybe 40 minutes each. And then, then Jerry's usual Arts Rational programming would then embellish that. I've got one guy who became a regular actor with Theatre in a Row, who actually wrote a play called A Warm Cup of Hot Chocolate, which is the only play where I was able to get somebody from the First Nations department in the Canada Council to come hear it. I had an entirely First Nations cast. It was an amazing moment for Roger. It was just like nothing like this had ever happened in his life. He wrote a play. He was able to be proud of something that had a bit of body, something that was his expression, something about his time working, looking after bridges. He was the guy that lifts the bridge up and down before you get to the airport. He's the guy out there before you get to Rayful Island, the little drawbridge that goes up and down, because a boat's going to go through. So this was a play about a guy who's on a bridge, who wants to throw himself off. And he could see that his talents were being shown, and he was involved. Dora Sanders wrote about SkyTrain, about not having your ticket right when you should have your ticket, and the ticket inspectors coming around and harassing a woman over 70. We did 5 plays by people from the Asian community. The original people in the Vancouver Asian Community Theatre. The Vancouver Asian, it was either VAT, V-A-C-T. Before they've since gone on and done bigger things. But, the one woman wrote about what it was like to see Chinatown as an immigrant with their parents driving through Chinatown in the 50s or in the 60s. They were just marvelous short plays that were from their hearts, that were in particular about certain issues that they felt very strongly about. Roger, I do stay in touch with all the time. Bob, actually, we did a play called Short Reports. No, what was it? No, it wasn't short. It was a play about a hotel, and Bob, I think, wrote a scene in that. That was the first real piece of work, and that was done for one performance only at Carnegie. And the guy, Michael Clegg, saw it and said, because they were short scenes by people in the workshop that we put on. It was about a hotel. It was about an SRO and what goes on in an SRO in the different rooms. And Michael Clegg saw this and said, wait a minute, there's something going on here that's really good. So I never got anybody to say to me, stop, what are you doing? Jason Harris, Logan, was a marvelous actor, writer, was in the first production of Bruce, who said to me, desperately wanted to be in it. I said to him, Jason, your equity, I've got to raise more money. Jason would often say, is there a way you could turn a blind eye? I said, no, we got to really tried to honor the union, but you got to dance. And Jason said, I can't dance. But he did dance, and he was marvelous. Dora, we ran her play, which is, if Dora's out there, Dora, for God's sakes, get in touch with me through Theater in the Raw. But I ran her play, wrote to her, said, you know, we're going to run your little one act, that Transit Authority. Haven't heard a word, so I just don't know. I don't know if she's, you know, if she's there, if she's still with us. And, you know, it's as they say, it's complicated. It's complicated. There were marvelous, real grassroots stories, real semi-rough edge, but marvelous pieces of writing that, you know, unless you want to keep your ear to the ground and say, wait a minute, it doesn't have to all be somebody rich and famous. It doesn't have to be somebody running the New Yorker or in the New York Review of Books or in the New York Times. You know, there are people out there struggling who can put pen to paper. They can turn out something that you and I won't hit the button on as close as they will. Like your interviews really going into the Downtown Eastside and talking to those people that you were talking to who were, you know, administering drugs to people. But what was fascinating about what you found out is they were drug addicts themselves. So it's not somebody in an Ivy League tower who is coming up. These are people who have felt it, who've lived it, who know it, who can be sympathetic, have an affinity towards those hooked. And that was the thing with these plays that we ran. There were 13 of them. One of them was all women's. It was about the women's. I forget what it's called, but it's the women's building on Columbia and Cordova. It's a kind of a shelter only for women. I wasn't allowed in, so I had to get Katrina Sideros, who's our admin person at the time, to go in and do the interviewing to get that particular 13th radio play. Like in Dora's play, which we just ran, you know, she's going, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, her main character, oh dear, I can't find my transit pass, oh dear, you know, and, you know, that anxiety, you know, you've got this transit authority character standing over saying, come on now, you know, you're looking at a fine, and she, oh dear, you know, it's like, it's real. One of the first ones we ran was Jason Logan's piece about the Pantages Theater. So that was developed in the workshop. And that was about the Pantages Theater that was on Hastings. Gorgeous, beautiful building that they tore down. The original Pantages Circuit Theater was on Hastings. There were two of them. And this was the original one. The other one that was a bit more gaudy had been torn down a lot earlier. But this one was still there. Beautiful red old building. Acoustics were perfect. The reason why it was torn down was various different people to make money were on the roof, taking the copper roofing off it and selling it. And so it started to leak. And it leaked very badly. And so it became it was a real boondoggle to get it, to raise the money to save it, which was a great pity. Great pity. You know, it's like killing a person. You know, there are buildings in our lives that mean something. There are people in our lives that mean something. And when you tear a certain building down, that's a marvelous structure that's been put up so well and that has great architecture, it's like killing. It's killing something. I mean, I think the library, the Vancouver Public Library building, is a marvelous building. Imagine blowing that apart. You know, you've got real character there, and it's meaningful. Well, the Pantages Theater, Jack Benny had played there, Groucho Marx, various wonderful vaudevillians, had done their thing there. And it's gone. That history is gone. And the city has had other things in mind. We could get into a whole argument about their social planning, with buildings going up and down and moving neighborhoods out, and So here was the Pantages Theater, and that was our first radio play out of the Carnegie Theater Workshop, and we put every character we could that was in the workshop to play the characters. Patrick Foley, the marvelous writer, whose plays I ran. His one act that Roger was in, the main actor, that I ran. Is it called a hot box? No, it wasn't called a hot box. What the hell was the name of the play? But anyway, that was one of the plays we did more than anything. And Patrick came every session. You couldn't get him out of there. He's a marvelous writer, but each writer has their own characteristics. He was very different than a Bob Sardi. Patrick was much more inward, whereas Bob was much more outward. And how you deal with those personalities. Bob could change things on a dime, and would come up with a zillion ideas. Patrick's much more intuitive, in a way, cerebral, very, very cerebral, and much more slower moving with what he comes up with. But he's a marvelous writer, and he's still going down there. He still goes down to Carnegie when right now with the pandemic. A lot of those writing sessions may be saving people's lives. It's not just all about safe drugs or finding a home. It's about doing things that are constructive and creative and meaningful. And Carnegie has just been a lifesaver, absolute lifesaver. We're very, very lucky to have it, and we're very lucky to have people like Rika, and for a while Dan Tatro when he was working there, and Michael Clegg. I mean, we were very, very, and Muggs Sturgeson, who became chair of the board of directors. Very important stuff. I wonder if Margaret Pivos, she may have been First Nations, she may have been at one point head of the board. You'd have to check that out to see my accuracy. But that was a tiny bit, I tried to stay out of the board of directors and just stay focused. I had enough on my hands.
For me to get too near, 'cause these streets are full of sorrow, and it can make you sad. And the people hope tomorrow that their luck won't be so bad. And if you went where I go, and if you saw what I see, and if you did what I do, you'd need some healing too.
Carnegie is a good thing. It's a positive move. It's a positive thing. And people like Gene Swanson, Libby, Bruce Eriksen, they didn't, but they didn't sell out. They haven't sold out. They've stuck to their guns. They've stuck to principle. It's not about money. It's not about somebody coming along and saying, look, here's $50,000 to shut up, or here's I can do things for you. It's about a principle. And I think that they've stuck to it. I haven't followed Jean that much lately, but I know that we would pass each other by in Carnegie all the time. But she stuck to her work, and I stuck to mine. And she never tried to influence me. But I knew that she was trying to do the best she could in that office. And her partner, Sandy Cameron, was just fantastic. His poetry, which I've just read a couple of his poems. One was about the Women's March from 1995, which was staggering in relation to what you've done, because I watched your video. So little has changed. The same people, the same women are being found dead in the back of in the alley behind the Balmoral, and they're indigenous. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, something's wrong. Something's wrong, and Carnegie is there to try to right the wrong as best they can.
You've just heard from Jay Hamburger, the artistic director of Theatre in the Raw, and the work he's done in Vancouver's Downtown Eastside. Along with stage and radio plays, he's also held workshops to help novice writers develop their craft. Thanks for watching.